if you just have enough confidence in yourself and in the people around you to make that decision, like take their inputs, kind of look at what you have in front of you and make the decision, that's way better than holding off on it. Because even if you're right most of the time, by just waiting, that one time you're wrong, it'll kill you, kill your team, and it'll be something that'll be difficult to recover from. So
Jake Mayo, what's up?
not too much. Yeah, just back visiting for a little bit for sister's wedding.
That's right. You guys heard that right. Last name is Mayo. This will be my kid. First time I've had a kid on the podcast. I have to have my daughter on. Actually, Ann doesn't have the same last name anymore.
Nope.
For the very reason that you were here.
Yeah.
Now she's a Hayes. Hayes isn't bad. What do you think?
No, it's not bad.
Annie Mayo Hayes.
Bad.
It's not unique, though. There's a lot of Hayeses, but there's not a lot of Mayos out there.
That's true.
Told you I met a Mayo, right?
I actually had someone I worked with knew a couple Mayos in Arkansas, and I was wondering if they were from our family. But he reached back out to them. They didn't know the Billy Mayo Quintet or any of the Mayos. From
number one hit. And I'm glad I've never even talked about that on here. So my dad's dad had the number one hit in 1949. If you ever listen to it, it's like I want to have a dog for Christmas or something. I've got his original clarinet and the little 45. I need to shadow box it, or I don't know, whatever you call it when you put it in a frame. Well, did you bring a dad joke?
I did.
What you got? I'm already laughing. What do you got?
Do you know why it's so hard to find elephants hiding in the trees?
Why?
It's because they're good at it. That's why.
It's terrible. So if honeybees make honey, what kind of bees make milk?
I don't know.
Boobies. It's so bad. Oh, that's awesome. Well, all right, cool. So the reason I had Jake on is because if you guys don't know his background, he went to the Naval Academy and graduated as an officer, if you don't know how that works, and then went into the submarine community. And so he's driving around one of 13, is it? Big Ohio-class submarines that have a bunch of big, scary, world-ending nuclear warheads on them. So the leadership is a hot topic all the way from the academy all the way through. Would you agree?
Yep. That's something you train on, but something you're never really ready for till you get thrown into the situation. Definitely unique. So
you want to just give your background overall, because I'll probably butcher it. So how did you get on into submarines? Everybody always wants to ask me, and I'm like, ugh, because I know it's a unique assignment, even within the Navy. But how did you get from academy to submarines?
Yeah, so when I was at the academy, I originally wanted to be a pilot. Medically, my eyes didn't let me do that, so it's kind of three options, which was Marine Corps, submarines, or the surface warfare community. Was looking for a little bit of a smaller community, and that's where I was really in between Marine Corps, submarines, and then just kind of with my background at school and just having more academic success. Not that I was too bad at the physical side of the house, but doing a little bit better with academics, I thought, why not submarines? And then also too, kind of looking at the quality of people over the years and the people I knew that I interacted with and just knew from school. The ones that were gravitating towards submarines were the ones that I knew I wanted to work with. So that's kind of where it went. And the process is a little bit different. It's different for kind of every community you go into, but for submarines, for every person who gets selected, either it's a nuclear surface warfare officer or submarines, has to interview with the head of naval reactors in Washington, D.C. So
what was that like?
It's pretty crazy. There's his name is Admiral Hyman Rickover. If you want to read about him, it's not as crazy as kind of his interviews he used to have in the past. He used to do weird things to throw people off their games. He would cut basically the front two legs of a chair, so it's a little bit uneven. So when people went and sat in front of him, they never felt comfortable in the chair. He'd do a bunch of stuff like that to throw people off his game, knowing that he was bringing people into basically the nuclear Navy, which was brand new at the time. And it's really evolved from there, but it's technical interviews, seeing your personality, and then you have your final interview with the admiral, and he gives the final yes or no on whether or not he wants you in that community. So
Was it stressful?
Yeah, it was stressful. one day they kind of got us all on a bus, and you go over to naval reactors, and at naval reactors a little bit different than other commands. Everyone's wearing civilian clothes. You don't know if you're talking to like an admiral, if you're just talking to
like an
a
engineer
lieutenant or
something.
a civilian engineer. You don't really know.
So they have some civilians in the interview process too.
Yep. You just kind of get assigned random people, and you show up, and they can ask you pretty much whatever they want. So
What are they like? What kind of stuff do they ask you? Like math problems, or is it just basic problem solving? Or?
it's technical, normally technical like math, maybe heat transfer stuff, but it depends on the interviewer. So it can go from like a simple make sure they know the basics to I want you to solve this really complex problem, and it could be they want you to solve it to be correct, or they just want to see how you go through the process of solving
interesting.
it.
So sometimes there's not the answer's not the end game. It's just to see how your thought process works.
Yeah.
And you got to do psych evals and everything just in case.
Not as much psych evals, but that's kind of part of the process though. When they do the interviews, is you do it face to face. So they really they get your background before, and then they poke you with questions, and it's really they do a good job of finding candidates who they know are going to be resilient and push on to get out there, because it's a difficult job. So
graduate from the academy, and then what? So you get selected, I guess, as I should say.
Yeah, then you can read up online. You go through the nuclear pipeline for all submarine officers in the Navy. You go to nuclear power school in Charleston, South Carolina, and then you basically learn the background of what it's like to run a nuclear reactor and how the Navy wants to teach it to you. And that'll be, you can be a history major, you can be a nuclear engineering major. Then it's designed for the Navy to teach you the basics and fundamentals behind how to run a nuclear reactor. And then you move on to, it's called prototype, which is a hands-on with the old nuclear reactor, how to run it, going through processes, looking at technical manuals, that sort of stuff. Then from there, once you graduate that, you have a 3-month, it's a basic officer's course for submarines called SOBIC. And then you learn just the basics of submarining, and then you get sent to your first submarine. So,
what were you doing when you went to Connecticut for a minute?
That was the SOBIC course.
Okay, so that's like post.
So submarine officer's basic course, right after you finish. It's normally after you finish power school and prototype, you go there for 3 months, and then just learn. That's when you move more towards like how do you drive the submarine, that sort of stuff, and then you go out to your submarine from there.
You know, it's funny. Like I'm asking you these questions, and people would be like, "Oh, you probably already know the answers." I really don't. Like because the submarine community is so secretive. Like I've told people before, like when you were going underway, you would never be able to tell us when you were leaving or coming back, or there was no communication. So I really just kind of left it alone, because you're like, I really can't tell you anything about it. So I'm like, okay. So I've never asked you any questions, even about power school or anything. So I'm learning just as everybody else is. They're probably like, you don't know this? I'm like, nope, I have no idea. Because I just figured it was like, if I can't ask, I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to bother you about it. We've had friends be like, doesn't that drive you crazy? Don't you want to know? I'm like, no, it's his deal. Like if he's not supposed to talk about it, we're not going to talk about it, But I haven't heard these things either. So then you get assigned to one of the 2 bases. You're out on the Olympic Peninsula. You're on a submarine. It's like 150-ish people on the Ohio class sized, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, around there.
How many officers are on there?
It'll depend, but anywhere from, I'd say normally around 15 is what you'd have. But it
so
depends.
10% or so of the force's officers.
Yeah, not a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would think, and I'm just guessing, like underwater with a bunch of people in tight quarters for 3-4 months, whatever that time is, leadership is a big deal. And if it wasn't good, it could be, it's a stressful situation. Like, I don't even know, do you ever get days off when you're down there? I never asked you that before. Do you just work every day?
There's some form of work every day. You're in a metal tube underwater, and it's like not completely similar, but somewhat similar to space. Everything is trying to kill you. So it's you just making sure systems run as they're supposed to, and making sure you're doing your routine kind of checks of things. And it's a daily process. There's no real days off. you just kind of get little breaks here and there. People help each other out to give people a little bit of time off here and there, but you're going to sleep and you're waking up where you work. So
it's crazy. And you'd have shifts where you were like driving the sub and doing all the things, right?
Yeah, you just have a watch kind of rotation. So
it's so funny because I remember you as a little kid, like picking your nose and crapping your pants. I'm like, you're driving a $2 billion submarine that could end the world. I'm like, do they know you? All kidding aside. All right, so you get down, you're underwater. There's very few officers. Leadership is important in that setting.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. And it's important in that setting. It's different though. It's a weird style of leadership because you're always out all the time. You see things that leaders like you would not expect to happen with leaders or to see of the people that you lead, just based off you're with them all the time. So you'll see those breakdowns of like you just can't deal with someone for months on end, and like you'll have lapses here and there. That I would say the communities does a lot better with, just because you're there for months on end, waking up, working with the same people every day. It's hard to not see that happen. And also, too, since you are working with those same people every day, side by side, there's a lot more difficulty when it comes to just maintaining, especially for the officers, not like stooping down to the level and keeping yourself in the leadership role. Like, there's nothing wrong, of course, with getting to know the people that you work with and stuff like that, but there's a line where if you get past a point and you get to a stressful situation and you try to tell someone to do something and you've kind of put yourself down on their level, then it's hard to get them to do stuff when you need them to do stuff. So that there's that aspect of it too.
So you have to keep like professional boundaries, even though you have to be friendly at the same time.
Yeah,
that's an interesting dance, hey.
Yeah, I mean, you could try to not be friendly, but
that's not
no one's
going to
deal with that for 4 or 5 months, however long you're out. So it really just depends on the person too. Like a lot of people some people are pretty stoic and fine with kind of sitting in that. Other people are more social, so they kind of need to get that social aspect. And there's not, like you said, not many officers, and you're working in kind of watch sections with people who are lower ranked than you all the time, and you're in charge of divisions of people who are lower ranked than you. So some people, they need that social aspect of it. So it depends on the person, just kind of like any leadership role. It's just, this is more, I would say, like in a pressure cooker where you're just at it all the time. You're doing highly technical things, and you're also working for really, really smart people. That's what people don't understand. Like the people you're working with on the submarine, and like a lot of people in the military will tell you, like the people you're leading know more about the things than you do. Interesting.
Well, of course, obviously not at that critical, I wouldn't say scale, but intensity. But it's the same thing in a business. Like the more we grow, the more you hire specialists to do stuff, and like the dumber you get. So like there's a lot of I understand what our company does, but I don't know as much about a specific function as people on the team, right? So it's a weird thing because you're leading people that know more about their function than you do, and that's actually the way it should be, right?
Well,
so when you come onto a boat, there's senior people there that have been doing that for a while. Is that what you're saying?
Well, so just the training, like when they send the officers through training, it's not as much of like, they do have you learn very specific aspects of things. But a lot of the decision process and what they work to get you is basically input of like, what situation do I have going on? What are the things I'm seeing to making the decision? Because that's, you get paid to make the decision. But of course, you're not going to know the little itty bitty, like nitty gritty details of something that a guy works on every day, because that's what his division.
Like he's a radar guy.
You're not going to be in charge of, like, you're not going to know all the specs needed to torque something down or all of that sort of stuff. Like they work with that every single day. But what you are in charge of the division for like maintenance schedule, and hey, does this need to get pushed now, or can we wait to do this? Like you're making those decisions. So you need to have a baseline knowledge, but the real thing that you get good at is 1, reading people, and then 2, kind of taking in all the inputs you have in front of you, and then giving the best decision and making that decision for your team. So
Well, it's funny because we had an earlier conversation. I wrote down 3 things. So just to keep it organized, we'll do like the 3 main points of leadership that you've learned, right? And for anybody listening, like you'll be out in January, right?
Yep.
You're living in Naples, Italy now, which isn't bad. We've been over to visit. It's freaking awesome. Speaking of a little bit of Italian. And then you're married to a Swedish girl, Josephine, who's awesome. And you own a home in Stockholm already. So that's your future. But looking back, whether it's academy and all the way through the subs, I wrote down 3 things based on our conversation. The first one is always be honest. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of also a quick disclaimer before we go through these. These are my points of view. It has nothing to do with the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy. But yeah, so always be honest. I don't think there's been, with the exception of course, like there are small exceptions. I don't think there's been any situation I've been in where either hiding the truth or like trying to wait till later to give someone a straight up answer has really benefited me in any way. And whether or not that is you making a decision of breaking bad news to your guys or the team around you, or if it's making a mistake, like honesty, a lot more people respect honesty, even if it comes a little bit harsh, than they do you saying something to their face and then them having to learn later, either whether it's you made a mistake or that they have something coming down the line that's going to be painful. Whether it's you have to push off maintenance that's going to keep them there on the weekend, or you're going to have to, there's a lot of work that's going to be coming in the future because of a situation like a sticky situation you're in. Honesty has always been key, and that's always been the thing that people around have respected the most, and that's what I expect and respected from my peers and the people that work for me. I'd always, like, when I got new guys in my division, I'd always tell them, like, I don't care if you make mistakes. I care if you make mistakes and I find out last. That's what I care about.
Right.
Like, I want you to be honest with me. I want you to have the feeling you can be honest with me, because if you can't be honest with me, then we can't fix the problem together. And with the exception of course, like pretty extreme things in life, I don't think that many people are either getting fired or ended up in like terrible situations of being honest at the start.
Right.
Most of the time it rolls downhill. You make a bad decision and you either hide it or lie about it. And then that leads to something else that happens. It's kind of downstream from that happened because of that decision. Most of the time, if you just own up to it and tell someone, that's the best way to go about it. So
yeah, and you see that even in the press. If there's like an athlete or something, and they just say, even if what they did is not great, if they just admit it up front, people are pretty forgiving in general, right? Well, that part relates perfect into the next point that I wrote down that you said is like a bad decision is better than no decision. So you mentioned something about like, hey, if you made a mistake, is that what you're referring to with the decisions?
No, this was kind of pushed more towards my job and my experience, but it can be applied pretty well. But a lot of the times, like I was saying earlier, the people that work for you have a better knowledge of the process that they need to go to for very specific things than you do. A lot of the times they're just waiting on you to give them the green light to do it. And there are a few times where they'll look at you, have no idea, and like everyone will be turning and look at you and they'll be like, oh, okay, you need to make a decision and go. But for the most part, people need you to make that decision, and it can be wrong. Like, don't get me wrong, there are catastrophic decisions, but a lot of decisions, even if it's the wrong decision, it at least gets you in the direction of making the right decision. And the fact that if you make the wrong decision, normally some sort of feedback or something will tell you, holy crap, I made the wrong decision. Right. And then you correct it towards the right decision, compared to if you just sit there and you just like wait on it and wait on it and wait on it. The people who work for you would rather have you make that wrong decision and fix it a couple hours to a couple days later, rather than you waiting on something, and then you get close to a deadline, you finally make a decision, and then what if you make the wrong decision then you're up against it, then they're stressed, everyone's stressed, and that's really where, like, if you just have enough confidence in yourself and in the people around you to make that decision, like take their inputs, kind of look at what you have in front of you and make the decision, that's way better than holding off on it. Because even if you're right most of the time, by just waiting, that one time you're wrong, it'll kill you, kill your team, and it'll be something that'll be difficult to recover from. So
I think a lot of people do that, procrastination for fear of making the wrong decision. But like what you mentioned, in a more of a life or death with what you guys do, but not every decision's that way. It's the same thing in business, right? It's like you've got, like, if you make a wrong decision, it's like, I've heard it say, like, fail often and fail faster, right? So make bad decisions early in the process, learn from them, fix them, and then you'll get to the right decision quicker. Because to your point, if you wait a long time and then you make a catastrophic decision, you run out of runway, especially if you're on a tight deadline like you guys often are. You have no chance you didn't learn anything, and you have no chance to fix it, right? So it's just a mess. So, but I think that has to be cultural, because if you're the type of leader that jumps all over everyone for every little mistake they make, they won't do anything, right? And there are some decisions they can make without you, right? But then if you're the leader and that's the example that you set, is you ruminate and perseverate on all these things and you just never put your foot down and make a decision. They're just like, ugh. But that will trickle down to the rest of the folks in your charge, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one thing too that I've really enjoyed about the submarine community is we are really critical of each other. We will we'll mess with each other all the time. If someone makes a mistake, like, they won't hear the end of it for a couple days. But at the same time, we all went through the same training, and the training that the Navy puts you through for that is one that puts you in situations to fail. So before, like, you will fail many, many times in your career. And as long as you are willing to either admit your mistake and you're willing to fail and just say, all right, sounds good, and let's do it again. Like that was a big thing that you learned, but you need the right leadership and the right process in place for people to feel that.
Right.
Because if you're micromanaging, say someone fails, and then the first time they fail, you immediately pull out whatever program they have, every little thing now you're making the decision for them. Then if I'm that person, and this is most of your workers, if you're that person, why would I do anything else besides just make some sort of product and hand it to you and let you make your little decisions on it? Because you took that away from me.
Right.
So why would I continue to try if I already know that whether or not I do a good job or a bad job, you're just going to micromanage me from there on. So you got to let people fail as a leader. And yeah, some things, of course, you need to make sure they're right the first time, but there are a lot of decisions that are made and a lot of things that happen more on a day-to-day basis that it's okay to fail and it's okay to let people mess up.
Yeah. Well, you have to have the culture right. You do. We did a podcast a while back. It was like the 4 styles of leadership. And there was one called like the Dominator, where you give no support. Like, it's like high accountability, but no support. Like, they don't have any knowledge, but you scream at them anyway, right? And there was like the Abdicator. I think it was like no support, no accountability, where you're just like, meh. You know what I mean? That obviously wouldn't work in your setting. But then the best was supporter. No, I can't remember. Facilitator. I think supporter was high support, low accountability, which was always stepping in and doing it for them. Yeah. And then you end up with just like a team that just doesn't do anything. And then you're wondering why it feels so frustrating that your team is like, again, I'm air quoting for those of you guys that aren't watching. It's like, why is everybody so stupid? Why can't they make these decisions? It's like, that's your fault, because you never gave them a chance to figure it out on their own, right? To your point. And then ultimately the best is high support and high accountability.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and also it's one of those too where, like, a lot of places, and it happens in the military, it happens everywhere, really. Like, the best way to have a group of people to where you're not just only relying on, like, your quote superstars is to have a system where you allow everyone to go. Like, of course, there's a certain line to where if they keep messing up, you can't have them keep going with projects or getting put on big assignments, but to not overload certain people as a leader, you have to continuously evaluate, okay, like, I need to put someone in charge of a project. Maybe I have an idea that they might not be the best for it, but at least I'm getting them in the situation and I'm holding them accountable for a decision, because there's a lot of things that happen day to day that are not like life or death. They're not the big decisions that, like, if you fail at it the first time, it's going to be the end of the world. So, and if you're not putting people in that situation, you'll find that later down the line, all of the projects you're given, all the quote important projects are going to like 2 or 3 people, and you got 3 or 4 people that are just getting the side projects.
Right.
And so you have these 2 people, and normally if you talk to them, they're not super excited about the fact that it's like, hey, I have these 4 big things going on. And they're normally, if they're doing those big things, they're smart enough to know that, hey, like Jimmy over here has got this one, like he's painting the logo on the side of the building, but you have me like in charge of all the accounting and getting all these things done behind, like for this big deadline that's coming up, and I'm staying here till 8 every night. He's like super happy leaving at 3, like like today he put a different layer on, you know what I mean? So
Right.
like that is a big thing that I saw, and that the best leaders that I worked for, and the best thing that kind of worked for me is like allowing people to fail, and that's just by allowing them to get put into situations that can be difficult for them. Maybe it is a little bit out of their reach, but at least you're getting them into that situation, letting them fail, and then holding them accountable so that in the future, if you give them something, you know that they know the process of, okay, like, hey, even if I get this wrong, I know that if I put my full effort and I'm accountable for what I did wrong, like they'll get to the right answer. And that's a way better situation to have than having a couple people who are just like, whatever. There's like, as long as I don't try, I'll just get these like really easy jobs. And then you have other people who are working their butts off. And those are the ones who become disgruntled and the ones that don't want to stay at your company anymore. So
Yeah, no, your company or a company.
Yeah.
Either way. And then last one you have, which is interesting because it's like, number 1 is like be decisive. Like you make it, like any decision is better than no decision. But number 3, you said you always have time. So what does that mean?
Yeah. So, like you said, it's a little bit counterintuitive with the one before, but there's maybe 1 or 2 situations I can think of in my career where I've had to make decision with the time seconds behind it. You always have a second to step back, think about it, take in what you're seeing in front of you, and make a decision. So, of course, you should never be afraid to make a decision. Don't ever be afraid to step up and say, okay, I'm in charge, we're doing this. But also, you don't need to rush to make a decision. You don't need to be so zealous about making that decision that you don't take in the stuff that's in front of you. So it's kind of the art and that balance. And it's something that is learned mostly with experience of, okay, what factors do I need to look at? And then once you have those factors, be able to make the decision. But you do also need to give yourself the time to look at the things in front of you before you make the decision. Like no one likes someone, like counter to no one likes someone who won't make a decision. People also don't like people who make decisions with no background and no knowledge of the situation. They just want to make the decision, so they say, we're doing this. That's equally as bad, just on the other side of the house. So you got to find that balance of, am I getting all the information I can to make an informed enough decision? But you don't need to be afraid to, I just need to wait to see this. I need to wait to see this. There is a point where you just have to make that decision. So, and normally kind of knowing what you need for a decision, that takes a little more time and a little more kind of fine tuning. And especially if you're kind of new to a field, like it'll take a little bit to make that decision. But that's where it's like, okay, you can talk to the people under you. They know who was in that seat before you were. They know what they need from their specific thing. So that's when you can kind of get the input of people to make that first decision. But once you get comfortable in that job, there's no point in sitting there like, oh, well, I don't know. Maybe I could wait for this. Maybe I could wait for that. It is better at that point. Like make the decision, move forward with what's going on. And then from there, yeah, if you messed up, you, like I said, be honest, admit it, and then you can correct it. But just wait until the last moment. That's going to hurt you.
So it is. Then it has to be a fine balance. So if you have enough experience, you can make faster decisions. Yeah. But if it's a bigger decision or a decision maybe that involves like lots of moving parts, lots of departments for you, departments in a big company, you don't make a rash decision, right? Certainly coming from a place of no knowledge.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to, yeah, it is an interesting balance because it almost seems diametrically opposed to like make quick decisions, but also like, hey, it's like, what is it like? Think fast, move slow. I've heard it said, where it's like, yeah, process it, but you don't have to go, full ham right out of the gate, especially if you're doing it from a place of ego where you're trying to prove yourself as a leader.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen some of that as well, right?
Yeah. You definitely see that, and you definitely see the people who like want to show that they know exactly everything about a situation. They're going to make the decision. And normally, like, there's some people who are rock stars and really know their stuff and are able to make those decisions, but the odds are it's not you. The odds are that's a one or two, like, very like few people who are able to make those decisions. And like kind of thinking back and tweaking what I said earlier about don't be afraid to make the decision. It's more of don't be afraid to own the decision more than make it. Because like, yes, don't be afraid to make it, but like also don't be the person who's like, oh, well, we're going to do this. Like, they recommended it. Yes, you want to give credit where credit's due. But if you're the leader, you have to say, hey, we're doing this. I'm making this decision as a leader. And then from there, where you can distribute out, say like, hey, we got really good inputs from this team this time. But like when you make the decision, you need to make it as the leader, right, and you need to own that decision. And then you own the consequences also.
Right.
But don't be afraid to make that decision and own it. But also don't, like you said, don't be too zealous and be like, oh, I know what's going on, because that's you do need a little bit of backup from your team to make especially the big decisions, because as much as you want to think you know the whole situation, there's always something that'll get you if you don't sit there for a second and take the time. So
do you think it's do you think consulting with your team is enough time? I guess every situation is different. Like you used one, I don't know if you can use it on here, of like you used one where like I had time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's plenty of time. Do you think like consulting with your team is the key, or I guess every situation's a bit different, right? Like
yeah.
How do you find, like if somebody's a new leader on here, right? We got a lot of new people that are coming from big corporate, really smart folks, but they're becoming entrepreneurs for the first time. And
yep.
So, whereas to your point, you're in a bigger company. If you're in marketing and you want to send out an email, it goes through legal compliance and then the email goes out. But like when you become an entrepreneur, you live or die by your own decisions. And that can be like paralyzing for some people, right?
Yeah. So
what is that dance? Like, how is it based on experience? Are you just almost set up to, I mean, obviously you're more process oriented, but are you set up to make those mistakes early before you can learn when to pause and when not to pause? It almost seems like a skill.
Well, it's a skill, but I would say the biggest thing I tell like new people that kind of either come like get on the job or get there is, and that comes to kind of the always be honest. Like, of course, as a leader, you don't want to step in and be like, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, you don't want to devalue yourself as soon as you step in the role. But it is better to step in and ask questions and learn the situation, learn your team. And like, yeah, as an entrepreneur, it's weird because it's a new thing. But there are other people who have done that before you,
right,
in some way, shape, or form.
Well, that's what's great about a franchise. It's like, here's a turnkey business model, just run the play. But still, the emotions that come with like, I don't have any, like we always say, listen, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So you've got this whole machine that's backing you up. It can still be terrifying. I've seen it. Like I've only been an entrepreneur, I've never had a real job. So like, I don't know what it would be like to work for someone else. So for me, it's like perfectly normal, but it's a very small percentage of people that actually take their shot.
Well, and it's even as simple too as like just sending an email, right? Like you get a task, or like say you're trying to do something and like you sit there and you get it and you look at it for a little bit and you're kind of unsure. I know plenty of people who will sit there and sit on it in like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then maybe Thursday they're at a point where it's like, ooh, I don't know. Let me start asking people. Like when you get in the job, like don't be afraid to ask the questions Monday, because if the decision needs to be made Saturday and you're waiting until Thursday, and you have people around you who now have to scramble, like ask the question Monday,
right?
Or like get it out there and let people know like, hey, this thing needs to be done by Saturday. Like these are kind of the things I'm thinking of. Like, do we need to look at anything else?
Right.
And like later on, you will learn all the things that need to go into the decision. But if you don't present the people below you and or reach out to other people with the decision that is coming up, the more you keep them in the dark and the more you kind of sit there and are wondering like, ooh, I don't know, should I ask this person, should I ask that person? Like, worst comes to worst, especially in a business, if you ask an entrepreneur another entrepreneur a question, or say like someone you're franchising with a question, if they don't have the answer, they probably know someone who does, or they know someone that's going to get you in that direction. So if you sit there and wait and wait and wait and wait till the last second and then ask the question, it looks bad on you, because then everyone's like, oh, well, have you not thought about this until now? When this thing needs to happen tomorrow?
Dude, I've got so many people in mind, because my history. Like before we came to franchising, I did a ton of business consulting. Yeah. And even experienced entrepreneurs, like if sometimes they'll go through a tough spot, it's like everything's going great. Then they go through a tough spot and they lose their confidence and they get paralyzed. Yeah. And so like for me, because I'm not emotionally invested in their business, I'm looking down at their business from crop duster height, and I'm thinking, dude, it's just right there. You just got to do the thing. And they're like, whoa, and I can see them like paralyzed, and it's so confusing. Now, thankfully, I've never been in that situation in 34 years. At least I kind of knew, okay, this is the direction that we need to go in. But I've seen it even with experienced entrepreneurs, and I'm sure even in your setting, like experienced officers just run into a thing, or maybe they make a few bad decisions and the captain gets onto them and their confidence gets low, and then you see their decision making get slower, less decisive, slower. It's like you just got to pull up your big boy pants and get back in the game, because, man, you can't go there, right? Because at that point, you're about at the same effective level as like a brand new person that doesn't know anything. Like having the knowledge doesn't help unless you can actually apply it and keep moving and apply it and keep moving.
Well, that's where like always having building a team that you're able to lean on. That's a big aspect of anything. But two, like not being afraid to use the team.
Right.
Like there's been plenty of times where there's been something that I know. Like I know, and I've known it for a long time, but like you get in the moment and something happens and you just freeze. The amount of times where like and something that I learned really quickly, like if you freeze and you're struggling, like someone in the room most likely always has either the answer or a better way forward than freezing and doing nothing.
But ultimately, you still have to move. Like
you have to
once
move.
you gather that data, you got to make that decision.
But whether or not that is you saying, like speaking up and saying, hey, does anyone have any recommendations? Yeah, they might look at you like, what? But they'll at least say like, yeah, we should do this thing. Like they're not going to not help you or not move forward in the process if you build the right team around you and provide and give them that culture where it's like they're not afraid to fail. They're not afraid to give their recommendations to make a decision. Then you're always going to have someone in the room that's at least going to get you in the right direction.
Right.
So, and that is part of making a decision. Like freezing and doing nothing is way worse than admitting that, hey, I don't know, like I'm struggling with this decision right now. Like, what do we have from the team? Like, what inputs do we have from the team?
Respect there too, for sure.
Well, and people would rather have that happen because people also they want to see like a lot of people are like at higher levels of leadership. You're not really seen as like human almost.
Right.
But people who work for you want to see you as human.
Yeah,
like
you humanize yourself. Yeah.
Like if you make mistakes and you admit it, that normally gets you more like rapport with the group than it does if you're just always like I'm always right and we're always doing this. Like they would rather have to see like they would rather, I guess, not see you fail, but they would rather see that you struggle with the same things that they do.
Right.
Than just being this perfect like robot person all the time. So
well, it's an art. I mean, look, it's like make a decision, but like take your time. It's like it says all these things are like, and you're listening to this, you're probably like, yeesh, it sounds like it's difficult. It's not. It's just experience. But it's certainly early on. Make decisions, fail fast, fix it, and again, it sounds so cliche, but every mistake is a learning experience. You don't have to look at it as a mistake, and if you make decisions in a timely manner, to your point, they'll be small enough where they won't be catastrophic. So, yeah man, I love it. No bonus question. Dead or alive, you can invite one person to dinner. Who are you having over?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Dead or alive, who would I have over to dinner? I mean, there's been a lot of people in the world who've changed a lot of things.
Well, it might be multiple, but you got to pull one.
Just one? Okay.
If you want to know what Matt said,
What would Matt say?
Adam Sandler.
Why is that?
That's what I said. I'm like, bro, of all the people in the world to sit down with and have a conversation with at dinner, you'd have Adam Sandler. He's like, I just want to have some fun. I'm like, oh, God. For anyone listening that's in the franchise, don't worry. Matt's actually more intelligent than that. But I don't know if he was just pulling my leg or what. But he's like, yeah, Adam Sandler. Terrible answer.
I don't know. I think I'd probably just, with my background, kind of have to go through and talk to, I don't know, maybe I'd say like Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Oh, yeah. That'd be cool.
Just like someone who, like, can you imagine, like, you make normal decisions in business are really cool, but you imagine, like, being the guy who's sitting there, right? And you are making the call to send, like, other humans into a battle that you know is going to have losses. Like, doing that kind of risk analysis and that kind of pressure cooker, I just want to see, like, the ones who made the big decisions. And also, you never know. Sometimes your people are just lucky, right? Like, you hear documentaries and it's like, well, like, we attacked here and we got lucky because they thought we were going to go over here and there's no intel telling. So, like, having someone, I would say, like, that's why I'd say Eisenhower,
right?
And just kind of
Churchill, any of those guys,
just talk through the big decisions of, like, how did you make this? And, like, and those are the guys where it's like, there were people before them, but most of the people were dead that made those big decisions.
Yeah.
And also, like, technology is changing, like airplanes became big, and I mean, they started in World War I, but then you had, like, those massive, like, battles in the air in World War II and D-Day and all that stuff. Like, making those big decisions for me would be something to just like kind of go through their mindset. It wouldn't, I don't know, it wouldn't be like a fun, I'd say, like Adam Sandler, dinner.
Dude,
I wouldn't be
the dumbest thing. Everyone say Adam Sandler. I just listen to him on a podcast. I don't have to have him over for dinner. He's still alive. That's like Bill Burr. He's making fun of Scientology. He's like, they got a guy named Ron. He's like, probably had a fucking driver's license. He's like, I saw him trip over something on the ground. Like, dang it. It's hard to get into it if it isn't really old, because you could still see him. He was alive like 40 years ago. All right, man. Well, that's it. I appreciate you being on. I guess we're going to go grab a bite, right? You taking back off tomorrow. So,
back off tomorrow. So.
Well, that's it. Hope that helps you guys. Appreciate you being on.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Peace.